So before I quite get started with the Blender stuff, how many people here have like an art background? Like any, art background as in like using 3D programs like Maya or, anything? Nobody? So this is basically like welcome to 3D for like a majority of people in this room?
Oh crap.
Don't say. Sorry?
I used Maya in middle school once.
Great!
Cool. We've got one person.
Well, okay. Basically, I know that everybody here is a noob at 3D. That's fine. I wanted to gauge how slowly or how quickly I should go through various things like what does orbit mean and stuff like that. All right, so first things first, when I open up Blender, how many people like selecting things with their right mouse button as opposed to their left mouse button? As I assumed, nobody. Blender has this on by default. I would suggest changing it by either using Control-Alt-U to find this menu, or you go to File, User Preferences.
Do you recommend using a mouse instead of
I would definitely recommend using a mouse because middle mouse is oh so important. Unless you want to try using the Numpad emulation. Or not the Numpad emulation, the mouse emulation in Blender. But I've never used that before, so I probably wouldn't be able to teach you that. Now, to switch between that, go to Input. And then we're going to click Select with Left. Yay! So now we'll be able to click on things and select them with the left mouse button as opposed to the right mouse button. If you want to switch back to that default, you can in this same menu. For those of you using laptops, and for those of you not using laptops, you can click Emulate Numpad, because the numpad is surprisingly important in Blender. If you don't have a numpad, it's fine, because Emulate Numpad can sort of take care of a lot of the issues, not all of them. I'd save user settings unless you want to do this every time you open the program. And then we can close out and get started. All right. First, we're going to deal with moving around the environment. I'm guessing everyone's mouse has a middle mouse click and nobody has one of those silly Apple mice that don't. Well, if you click and hold middle mouse button, you can orbit all the way around. It's wonderful. If you've used a 3D program, this might be the same thing. If you hold Shift while clicking in the middle mouse button, you can pan. Lovely panning. And if you use the scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out. Everybody good with that? Any questions on that subject? No? Moving on. Now we're going to get into like viewports, so different ways to look at how the scene can work. This is where the numpad or the number keys, depending on what you have in front of your keyboard, will come into importance. If you think about a number pad in the way of one is in the bottom left-hand corner of your numpad, that acts as the front view selection. So if you hit 1, you should go to the front view. Now from this, if we use directions from the number pad, 7 would be up, and 3 would be the right view. So we can use this to toggle between front, top, right views. If we hit the 5 key, we switch between orthographic and perspective modes. super jarring, but it can help when trying to figure out little bits of geometry when perspective can get in the way. This works for the number row too, so for laptops, by checking emulate Numpad, this helps you out there. Everyone get that? All cool? Great. Let's go back to this perspective view. And now I guess we'll begin how to manipulate objects. So, Blender uses a lot of shortcut keys. For translation, rotation, and scale, I prefer to use the shortcut keys because they make manipulating objects and elements in the viewport faster. But you could also use these gizmos, like translation along the Y, translation along X, translation along Z, using the gizmo that's provided. You can change this gizmo at the bottom menu here. This one is rotate, this one is scale. And you can change on the object various orientations of this gizmo. However, I won't be using the gizmo as much. Instead, I'll be using hotkeys a lot of the time. So if you want to grab something or translate it, you can hit the G key, and that lets you move the object around on screen just with your mouse. So it's basically, free grab, free translate. If I wanted to constrain it to an axis, all I have to do is hit the name of the axis when in this mode. If I hit X, I've constrained all the translation movement to the X-axis. If I hit Y, I've constrained all movement to the Y-axis, and if I hit Z, I constrain all movement to the Z-axis. Let's say I wanted my cube in its original position and I want to cancel what I just did. All I have to do is hit the right mouse button in this mode and everything will be reset, and my mouse doesn't control the movement of the cube anymore. Now, if I wanted to put the cube where in a place where I want it to be, all I have to do is hit left mouse button, and then it stays in place. That clear to everybody? Does anyone have any questions? Anybody need me to repeat anything? Good. Now, moving on, if you wanted to rotate something, you would hit the R key, R for rotate, and that rotates according to what plane you are looking at it from. So I'm rotating it currently around what my camera is looking at this point. If I wanted to rotate around the specific axis, just like translate, I can hit whatever axis I want to rotate around, and it will rotate around that axis. A little bit of an advanced tip: if my cube is at a side and I don't want on its side and I don't want to rotate it around a global axis, for example, if I hit Z, it will rotate the cube in this fashion. But say I wanted to just spin the cube from its top. If I hit Z again, it enters the local axis for rotation. So I can spin it in non-world space. Cool? Great. Scale, unsurprisingly, is controlled by the S hotkey, S for scale. Can also be constrained by the axes. Who knew? Things are very simple this way. Do I have to cover more of that, or does everyone get that? Great. Now we'll move on to editing the inner geometry of objects. Everyone ready? Now hit Tab. We have now entered edit mode. Yes. So in edit mode, you have access to individual points of the geometry, you have access to the vertices, you have access to edges, you have access to faces. These can all be manipulated to better form the geometry to how you wanted it to be. If I want to, so if I click on a vertice, like, I'm silly. I forgot to mention one more thing. The A key is selection and deselection. So A will either deselect everything or select everything. I'm terribly sorry that I neglected to say that in the beginning. This is very useful for selecting and deselecting. So if I deselect everything, select one vertice, and then hit G, I can manipulate that single vertice. If I use Shift and click, I can select multiple vertices and manipulate those. If I wanted to do a drag select, box select, I hit the B key for box selection, and I drag over multiple vertices, and I have selected multiple vertices. Now, you'll notice that it doesn't select any vertices that are behind the geometry. I probably, if I could, then I would have selected the vertice that's down here. If you want to turn that feature on, you can click this handy button down here, where you limit selection to visible, and I turn that off. So now I can box select to my heart's content through the geometry, and then modify it as I see fit. So, that cool with everybody? Everyone understand this? Great. Let's get into extrusion. Extrusion is, one of modeling's base functions to expand and make geometry more complex. If I want to, say, extrude a face to create a long neck of some sort, I can select a side or a face, and I hit the E key to extrude, and then just pull that out. It will automatically pull along which direction the majority of your geometry is facing. In this mode, before I click any mouse buttons, I can hit the G key to translate on not an axis. I can deselect whatever axis it was on. I can rotate the face to get some really awkward looking geometry. I can scale it, which could be good for making insets and things like this. But for now, I'll just stick to translation. So I can do that, extrude this face out here. I can do it again. Decide maybe I want to select this part, rotate it along the y-axis, select this part, move it over here, rotate it. I have this weird snake-like thing at the beginnings. So that's all well and good. We have this extruded face. If we wanted to add geometry, say in the middles of this, normally, or one might think you would have to delete this face, go back, and then re-extrude to a middle point, and then do that again. But luckily, 3D programs have evolved to the point where we can use we can cut edge loops. In this case, an edge loop is a bunch of edges that form a ring around it, and the edge loop is that one bit connecting it. So if I hit Control R, I bring up my edge loop selection tool, or edge loop creation tool. You'll see this little purple or pinkish, I'm not exactly sure which color this is, but that indicator indicates that we are now in edge selection mode, edge loop creation mode, and that I would be, if I click, I will create an edge loop here. this can change depending on which edge I'm hovering over. So I could create, I could split it this way, create one there, down here, all the way down there. But let's say I don't want one. Let's say I want like 2 or 3 or 4. That's using the scroll wheel. But no, I just want one. To get to the edge loop tool, you just use Control R. All good? Now, to place the edge loop in place, you just click, and it applies an edge loop. But you're not done here. You can slide this up and down depending on where you want to place the edge loop in terms of this face. It will always start from the middle and be able to go from to one direction or the other direction. If you liked it in the middle, you can right-click. If you don't want it in the middle, you can just left-click, and it'll be put in place. From there, it'll be selected, and you can manipulate it with, scale, rotate, grab, all the normal things. Good for everybody? So, one other thing I can get into is deletion. Let's say I don't want this face to be here because I actually don't know why we wouldn't want faces to be here right now. But let's say I don't like this face. We can get rid of it. We have the technology. We can either hit delete or we can hit X. For now, I'll be hitting X. It will bring up the delete menu. We can either delete vertices, which would delete all the vertices which I selected, which would create some very drastic changes to our geometry. If we want to undo this, we can hit Control-Z for undo. Go modern technology. We can delete edges, which will do something somewhat similar, except as we can see, these vertices are still here, connected by the bare edges of these edges. Or we can just delete a face, which creates this empty gap here that we can look into and see how terrible it looks when you can see the back face of faces. What a face, Devin. Now, let's say, oh no, we actually didn't want to do that and we've gone too far and we can't undo the deletion of this face. Well, if we want to create a face, we can simply select the vertices and hit the F key for fill, and we'll fill in the face. You use B for box selection. So now we filled in this face. It can be, moved around just as we normally would. It's filled in the face effectively. You might have to be careful though for more complex geometry. Let's say if we added an edge loop here and wanted to delete, we wanted to delete the faces here. We have this gap, and if we do the normal box selection of the gap we want to fill, and we hit F, we suddenly see that there is no line connecting these two vertices together. This face that we've created here is called an NGonz, which is a polygon with N sides. In 3D modeling, it's okay for certain applications to have NGonz, but oftentimes for games you want to keep your model constrained to using quads or triangles. NGonz are usually not something that you want to have, but you might not notice it at first because it just seems nice. The geometry doesn't have any edges that I need to worry about. It just seems to work. Except when you look at it like this. And all of a sudden that face that seemed so nice and solid isn't quite so solid anymore. Something to look out for, and something we can easily correct. If we use the knife tool, which is in this nice tools menu on the side, or the K key, we can select an edge, or a vertice here, select the vertice on the opposite side, click, which would create a nice line, and if we hit the space bar, it sets that line, creating multiple faces out of splitting that one face and making nice geometry that doesn't collapse in on itself. Awesome. Seems like everyone understands. Now, one problem that might come up is in the rush to create geometry and extrude, you extrude something and you say, oh no, wait, what am I doing? I don't want to extrude this. So you right click, but then you click somewhere else and you completely forget about it. In this situation, the model will seem completely fine until you try and manipulate these vertices again. Because you say, oh, I want to manipulate this vertice and I'm going to grab it. Where did that come from? It's staying here. I don't want this. This is a case where we have multiple pieces of geometry occupying the same space. Vertices are basically inhabiting the same position. They're still treated as separate vertices and separate faces, but it's just the difference is just way too tiny for any of us to see. We can quickly remove all of these instances by selecting everything and then going to this remove doubles key here. And we click on remove doubles and we'll see this message up here that says remove 4 vertices. This means that everything within a certain margin of distance will be merged together automatically. So now when I move this about, everything stays nice and all right, hunky-dory. So let's say we like this strange mushroom-like contraption thing, and we want to make it a little smoother automatically. So we don't have to manually go in vertex by vertex, inserting edge loops, and making sure that whatever model conforms to our standards. If we go back into object mode by hitting tab, going to the wrench in the right menu over here, this is the Modifiers menu of Blender. This is where you can access a lot of the settings. If you go add a modifier, subdivision surface, bam! It's smooth, and it looks like a really malformed peanut. So, now that we are here, if we pop back into edit mode by hitting the tab key, we can see that the geometry that we can influence isn't affected by, or the geometry that we can see isn't influenced in the same way as the geometry we can manipulate. It will automatically subdivide our objects, creating more complex geometry, and this modifier will also allow for smoothing, which blends edges together and makes a nicer gradation. So if we manipulate one of these vertices, we can see that the geometry would warp around it, but it's not quite the same one-to-one as we see here. If we wanted to simply hide this, we can hit the display, the little eyeball here, and we but we hide the effects of this modifier. It can be toggled on and off. Let's say we're happy with this strange amalgamation form. Well, we can get set on applying it, and to do that, we simply have to go to the modifier in object mode. So I've hit tab, and now I'm in object mode. I can hit apply. Now, if I pop back into edit mode, all of the subdivision aspects of it have been applied to the mesh. It's subdivided, it's smoothed, and when I edit sections of it, it doesn't quite smooth it out in the nice way we had it before. Everyone on track for this? Everyone good? Wonderful. Let's say I don't like this. I can simply hit the X key to delete it. In fact, heck, let's get rid of everything and start afresh. Let's add geometry. I can either go to the Create menu over here, and we have various mesh creation options like plane, cube, circle, monkey. I kid you not, monkey. It exists. This is Suzanne. It's a wonderful lighting tool for use later. But enough of Suzanne for right now. If I wanted to create another cube, I'd hit the cube button up here, or I could hit Shift A for a creation menu. In this case, I want to create a cube. I'm going to show you guys another modifier, which can help out vastly in terms of the 3D modeling process. It's called the mirror modifier. Now, if I hit the Tab key, go into orthographic front view, and then make an edge loop right in the middle of the front, on this front face, and right click, so it stays directly in the middle. And then delete half of the geometry. I have this half cube. Now, to make it so that I have the full cube, once again, I can go to Add Modifier and hit this Mirror tool. This Mirror tool allows for editing half the geometry so I can acquire fuller geometry that's symmetrized later. This is extremely useful for organic models with symmetry right down the middle. So I forget exactly what the symmetry is. It's good for people, though. Like, that's basically what I'm trying to say. It's good for, like, people, animals, and things like this. Now, if we go back into edit mode, back into the front view, we can see that if I move this one vertice, it'll affect the other side. But if I can't select, sorry, I can't select something over here. I can only select on this side, but this allows me to edit geometry in a way where I can, bridge out and make bunny ears or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what I'm creating here, but it's definitely something. So I can create more complex shapes in slightly faster time because of this symmetry. Let's see. Do you think there's anything else I should cover? These are the basics. Does anyone have any modeling questions? Any things that they feel like they want to know more about? Relatively quiet? Well, I can hand it off to Devin.
Oh, great.
And we can deal with the fun rigors of texturing.
Well, since all of you are new to modeling, this is going to be really fun. Okay, so modeling is only half of the process. You also have to give that model a material, which is basically what makes a rock look like a rock versus a piece of fabric looking like a piece of fabric. And so right now we can delete whatever Julius has made here by going to object mode and just delete it. Because we'll just be working with Suzanne, because Suzanne is nice. So under object mode in the tools menu on the left, we see these two button options saying smooth or flat. This will switch between smooth shading and flat shading. What this is doing is it is automatically averaging normals versus not. So in flat shading, every plane has its own, or every vertex has 3 normals, and those are designating how the light is going to hit each face. Versus in smoothing, all the averages between each face are going to be averaged into one normal, which means it's going to look much smoother and nicer. To make it look even better, we can add a subsurface to make it look like that, which is nice. So that's the first step. That's just to make it look pretty. But now we actually get into materials. So if we go over to the right and we see this button that looks like a little sphere globe thing, we click that, and you'll either see it already has a material, or in this case it doesn't. If we press this button that says new, we've automatically created a material that has now been applied to our model. This material has different features and stuff, which you can adjust below. Where diffuse is basically the base color as well as just the base color, and so you can make it blue or whatever. Yesterday I went with pink. Let's go with green today. And we can change it to different shaders. So a Fresnel has I don't know, quite honestly. I'm not good enough with types of materials. Just stick with Lambert. Lambert's the only one you'll really be using. Specularity is how shiny or not the model is. Yes? Oh, this? Okay, so let me erase this. So do you see this menu or something? Okay, click the new button. Oh, so you see a grid? Do you see that? Or like that? Yeah. Oh, that could also be, but okay. So specularity is how shiny it is and how hard it can be as well. So let's turn this into material. Ugh. Texture. No, there's no texture yet. So that's basically all we're going to be doing in material is changing these 2 values. We're not really going to be worrying about either of these, but you can have stuff like giving it a mirror, so it'll actually reflect things, but don't do that. It's horrible for rendering. And transparency, which makes things gives things alpha. But also don't worry about that because we're not going to be getting into that. So yeah, that's what a material is. So now to apply a texture to the material, we're going to go over to this menu right next to that. That looks like a checkerboard. And so again, we see there is no texture on this. So if we click new, we've now given it a texture. This texture right now is blank because it's by default set to image or movie. And being that we don't have any images loaded, it's not going to show anything. So we can change that to say wood or something, or voxel data, which is stupid, or Voronoi, which looks like cells. It's kind of cool. Stucky is just noise. All those things. You won't usually use this because this is mostly for doing procedural textures, but it's there if you want to. Mostly you will be using image or movie. And so if you find an image on your computer and just load that in by going to this open button. So we go to desktop. Now we can load our image. And now, under this, next to this button that says object mode, this is also how you can change to your different modes. Under this one, you're going to see a menu that says bounding box, wireframe, solid, texture, material, and rendered. This will change your model from being a wireframe to being what we've been using, solid, to being the material that's applied. There's no light in the scene, so you're not going to see anything in this mode, or rendered, which is going to render it using the current render settings, which is also not going to be used right now. But if we click this one that says texture, it is not being applied. Why is it not being applied? That's not fun. Oh, I know why. Then we're going to see how how this texture is going to be applied to our model. Being that we have an image there, right now it is by default on UV map, which I'm going to get to in a second. That's why we can't see it on this model. If we change that to something like global, or no, object, why is it still not being applied? That's very weird. Okay, well, we'll do UV maps, I guess. So make sure that's back to UV, because, yeah. So, as you see what I just did there, I split the screen. Let me do this again. So, how you're going to split the screen is you're going to come up to this top little bar, and when your cursor turns into the two-arrowed line segment or whatever, then you're going to right-click, say split area, then you can drag wherever you want the split to go, and there we go. It'll split it. There are easier ways to do this. Whoops. If you see this little caret thing in the corner, you can just click and drag that. Or you can hold Shift and click that, and it'll actually create a new window. It's very interesting, but that's only really useful if you have dual monitors. And then if you want to get rid of this secondary screen, you can go to the little section between them, right click, say join area, and then click on the side you want to get rid of.
You can also drag the screen.
What?
You can also drag it.
Oh, yeah. You could also drag this back and it'll automatically snap till the other one is gone. But so we want to. So on your second window, you're going to come to this little menu that's down here in the bottom left corner. Click on that and go to where it says UV Image Editor. You should see this grid. Is everyone caught up with that? Yes? Good. This is our UV grid. So called because it can't be X, Y, and Z, because those are already taken by the object. So we have the U coordinate, which is the horizontal coordinate, and the V coordinate, which is the vertical coordinate, or vertical axis. And so now back in our object, we can go into edit mode, and everything is already selected, which is nice. And we go to this shading UVs tab. And we have this object under UVs. It says unwrap. If we click unwrap, we have many, many options, which are very handy, except the two most handy ones we'll be getting into in a second. The ones that most people will teach you first are these projections: cube, cylinder, and sphere. A cube projection will basically project your UVs onto the UV map as if the model is trying to be a cube. Since Suzanne is not a cube, you end up with crap like this. Not cool. So if we do cylinder projection, it looks better, but it's still not very good because we have this face, or these faces behind here, like right around there, that are automatically in the same place as the front of the face, which is terrible for a UV map. You never want to overlap UVs unless it's purposeful. And then you also have spherical projection, which, oh gosh.
It's like cube, but
yeah, don't do this. There's much better ways. Two that are absolutely basically useless. Project from view. Yay! There's our model projected onto a 2D plane. Not cool. Don't use that. So next we're going to do this one that says Smart UV Project. Basically what this is going to do is it's going to split up our model based on the angle between edges. And so what we can do is we can set up the bounds. It goes up to 89 because for some reason it doesn't like right angles. And if we hit OK, that's automatically going to split up our model into different pieces, which are called UV shells. And so these different UV shells are what make up our model. The nice thing about the Smart UV Project is it is going to do its very best to make sure every face is the exact size and shape it is on the actual model. But you end up getting a UV map that looks like this, which is awful. You never want a UV map that looks like that. It'll cause more problems than it'll solve. But it's at least better. The real way to actually project your UVs is if in the edit mode you come over to this button that is edge select. Let's go back into solid. That'll be nicer to look at. Edge select. If you select an edge or a few, let's select a edge loop. You see this button that says mark seam. If you hit that, that is now where the unwrapping tool is going to automatically create its own UV shell. So if we mark a few seams, then it'll automatically unwrap it based on these seams, which is nice. Let me just real quick get rid of this. One rule of thumb, though, is you never want to put a seam in a place that is basically going to be easily viewable. So you always want to hide it. So, like, putting a seam onto the bottom of the nose would be a good idea. Inside the eye would also be a good idea. Around the face is a good idea, but don't put something on the front of the face because it's going to be very noticeable. And so this process takes a while, but it'll make it look all the better. Oh crap. Oh, whatever. This won't have the best edges, or best seams, I don't care. So, once we've got the edges we want, or the seams we want, we can select everything and come up with unwrap and hit unwrap. And it will automatically try to unfold the model based on those seams, which the seams I have are horrible, and this is a horrible looking map. But if you do it right, it'll look really, really nice. And this is how you have to do it.
It's already better than Q.
Yes. So this still looks the best for what we've got. So now we have it unwrapped. Rule of thumb, if you want another rule of thumb, you're going to want to move these around. So if we come down to the UV menu and hit this button that looks like a weird door, I guess. That's going to select things by UV shell. And so we can use the same controls that we do in the normal editor to move things around, be it G for grab, S for scale, R for rotate. Why not? E does nothing because there is no extrusion in UVs. You can still constrain along axes.
You can still box align.
Yeah, you can still use literally everything that, or almost literally everything that's in the normal editor. So once you get something like this, this is what you're aiming for. Now, let me go back into texture, not solid, into texture. Now if we come to this button that looks like a sheet of paper, click that, we'll see our image. Click the image, it'll automatically load it as our UV map. And now our texture has changed because we actually have a texture to it. And so where the UV coordinates are on the image is going to affect what it looks like on the model. So let's drag the face to Link's face and his eye. No, let's do this better. That's the wrong eye, actually. So, and, whatever. And we get something that looks like that when we play around with it. And so that is how you UV map textures. It is very handy. It is what you want to do with when you model, or when you actually get to texturing. Albeit this is a horrible map because the image is not made for this map. So that's the next part. And so if we move all our things back to like where they were, this'll do. This looks horrible, but it'll do. And we go to this image, or this button that says UVs. We say export UV layout. That'll bring us to this save menu. We can save this as whatever we want it to be saved. Blah. That'll export our UVs as a PNG. And so if we open that in Photoshop, wherever it's saved to, open with Photoshop. We can see that it has made a transparent layer that has our UV layout exactly as we have mapped it, which is really nice, because then we can actually paint on another layer. Say like, it's already on black, okay. Size. And like that. If we were to save that and load that as an image, then it would automatically map it correctly based on our UV map, which is very easy. Do it? Okay. Let's save as blah, PNG desktop. Save. Okay. New. Okay. Let's open up. Blah. So like that. So now we see what we've done in Photoshop actually has transferred over to our model, which is very nice. Another nice thing you can do in Blender is under this edit mode, we can see, or under this menu that I showed before, we see this thing that says, button that says texture paint. That's right, you can paint texture directly onto your model, as long as you have the UV set up. So like that, let's paint it. It'll automatically update the UV map. You can also paint the texture over here just by going to paint, and it'll automatically update the model. Which works, but don't use this. Please don't use this.
I mean,
You can if you want to, but it's not gonna look very good. The way you should use this is to paint is to basically lay out where you want the details of the model to be. That is far too big of a radius. So like if I wanted to add like a brow or something, I might put a line there to give myself an indicator of where that's going to be when I actually do a good texture. Or like say nostrils, stuff like that. And so that's going to give you the details, but then you have to save it. So we're going to save as an image, and yeah, let's save over that. So once we've saved that as an image, you can see it. Oh right, the desktop is here. It's automatically updated our image as we've painted, which makes actually making the details in Photoshop much nicer. That's about it for texturing. One final thing that I could show would be another useful feature, but not very oh crap, what the hell? Oh, because I'm still in texture paint. Dirt. Let's go to edit mode. So another useful thing is if we come up here and go to sculpt mode, this is where you really shouldn't dabble if you don't know what you're doing. So,
Which is why we're teaching it you right now.
yay! So if we go up to, here's our brush settings again, and all right, no, we're in the correct mode. We sculpt, our strength isn't up. Front faces, no. If we enable Dyn Topo, this is going to be fun. It'll automatically put it back into flat shading, but then we can, yeah, it is tiny. Then we can just actually start brushing along, and oh dear, it will actually sculpt and create geometry and stuff, but this will make your topology absolutely horrible.
Which can be fixed with all
Yeah,
the tools later.
you can retopologize later, but this is a fun little tool. You can also use this. You can also use this to bake normals, but that's way too difficult for beginner stuff. And we're turning Suzanne into a tumor. Yeah, I think we're done.
Wait.